thank you all for thank you UPH for inviting us for this evening event. I just visited 2 buildings and was astonished at the 2 type of works that I've seen today by Andrea Martin and as well as Ariko Andikabina. And it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to visit this exciting city again. Been here 3 times, and I think it's the and I came back. It's the comfortable feeling of being here, and how everything is measured differently. You know, if I compare the city KL, mostly traffic jams, but I've been here since I was here in 2009, and I actually haven't been to this part of town, but you can see that it's been rapidly moving towards a new kind of like huge development. Sometimes it can be generic, but upon those generic things that I've seen, there are several fine, outstanding works among them. And I hope that perhaps most of your students will probably generate things which can be addition to not just Andrea Martin or Ariko Andikabina, more than that. And also, before I came here, I got an email by Mr. David Utama, who invited me. Thank you to him. And the topic today was about more or less on fabrication. When I was teaching, I was involved in basically promoting those kind of things to my school. But looking at your school, it is actually much more advanced than what I see in my school. My lecture, my kind of like presentation tonight is basically will deviate slightly from there. And I've also written something about it. And I think I'm going to call this short presentation as measuring anomaly and faith in creativity. So, students, I'll start with the academic. The idea of architecture academics insists that you must always begin with basic fundamental things. And that means that to understand or memorize everything is what architecture is. But the funny thing is, sometimes you remember what you know, but sometimes you can't put your fingers on any other subject. This happens when you follow the kind of like linear type of education. But you still can do that by tracing things by chronology. If you are good in memory, you can trace everything, history and chronology. But if you're not good in actually understanding all this mapping, chronology, you can figure things out in fragments, small things, and then piece it together as you become older, become more matured, as architecture is fashion for the whole. Perhaps you can also, not just by looking at chronology, but you can also look at doctrines as well as other people's culture to basically connect all these things together. But of course, in academic, there's one thing that usually people don't actually talk about. It's basically connecting things by fate, by chances. This is quite what was my interest 10 years ago when I did my MH degree. I was working on a project entitled Fake Plastic. So here are some of the chronological pieces that was done during my working in UiTM, which is mostly publication. And this is the kind of publication that I'm doing now. And my MH thesis is called Fake Plastic, which works on this premise of basically fate. The ideas and concepts are thought out as fragments, open-ended source of production. An Austrian friend of mine refers to my work like a butterfly that roams anywhere it pleases and stays in the middle of an occasion just enough to breathe new life. So I chose this handsaw as this kind of butterfly that basically is open-ended. So from then on, you start to figure out certain things. You can see this kind of butterfly as a metaphorical element, or you can see it as a tool, but a metaphorical tool. You can place, or you can start to play around with this idea. And this is my understanding of creativity, that one thing doesn't actually have to be that singular with a singular purpose. It can be redefined and redefined again, reinterpret again. In my years of teaching, I had to do a studio program for the first year's design studio. I wrote a short story without any beginning or an end as part of a brief to be deciphered by students. So then I composed it in such a way that I want them to believe that that writing came from a real book. It's like one or two paragraphs, and they feel that that kind of brief is like you torn a piece of or two pieces of paper from a actual source. I also wrote at each end of the paragraph, well, this is a fake thing, as excerpts taken from which journal, so to make it more authentic. And also, but when the students read it, it should be read like reading from a torn page of a book. Like in the movie Three Colors Red. Have you guys seen that movie by Krzysztof Kieslowski back in 1993? That movie basically has two main characters, and the first main character was an old man. He's an old voyeur who likes to peek through other people's life by hearing things. He suggested that when a book should fall on the ground or any flat surface, unintentionally, then one should read that particular page. So the other character opens up that the other character did that when she was walking. The book was fall onto the ground, and she picked up the book and says that that important page of the book is fate, and you should read it. It must be important in life. So something like that. So she did it. She read it, and somehow in the course of the movie Three Colors Red, she was met with a drowning experience. But she met a boyfriend. But basically that's not the point of the story. The point is, the old man figured out a way to basically read the book. Another way to understand a book, not just by reading the whole book, by knowing the beginning or the end. It's basically by reading just in the middle, and you can start to basically map other things. Reimagine or reinterpret the movie on your own. So because the possibility of reinterpretation is endless by just voyeuring or probably peeping into the book. Before beginning of a new semester, when I was teaching, all studio coordinator requires the studio program to be vetted. I think it happens here. You wrote the studio program, for example, Hexstar, and all these things they vet, and you have all the traditional lecturers and everything likes to basically give their criticism towards it. So usually you need to have a strategy. For example, as a teacher, you need to have a strategy to basically not have an argument. So you give them what they want. Say, this is what the brief is, this is what the result is. But actually in my brief, I don't actually give the real scenario, because the reason is I actually don't know where this brief is going and what the outcome will be. I only have fragments. This is how I work things. It's better that way. Therefore, I was leading my students to a non-definite path. I imagine only glimpses of this idea. I believe that it's enough to get things started. That's how the kind of teaching that I was doing. That is why there's no sense of limitation, such as typical brief, schedule of accommodation, or type of building in what I presented to the students. I even told the students to not know where to go, which is much more interesting rather than knowing where to go. The fun part is that every time I presented the brief to the students, I can see the confusion in the face because of that. So I always explain the brief again to the students. meaning by meaning, words by words, and it gets more confusing. But the hardest part is not actually explaining to the students. It's basically to deviate the students in a certain way of thinking, not just thinking that everything has this end or everything has a beginning. It's basically to think about, to deviate them in a certain way of thinking, in an alternative way of thinking. This is actually quite exhausting than to have a kind of linear type of teaching. So the first thing that it's liberating, it's basically exhausting because of three kind of process that I apply during teaching. It's basically the first is liberating things, so a liberation process to the students. It is actually to question students' ideas and certainties about form and architecture. What they know now is actually wrong. Well, not to say wrong, but try to replace with something new or interpret that thing. This process intends to eliminate the existing history of things as to fabricate a new worldview of things. I usually begin by conducting mathematical exercise, like what you guys are doing in geometry, perhaps starting from Rika in Euclidean form. And then it's about eliminating symbols in architecture, for example, stars. So without all these symbols attached to all these meanings, you get a sense of freedom, liberation process. And the second thing that I did was, you need to recreate, after you basically liberate all these things, you need to recreate a new understanding of what you are doing. It's basically this type of training is the kind of thing that the Russian avant-garde was doing back earlier on. So you liberate things, creating new symbols. However, this avant-garde did not stop just at physical things. It basically goes on. It commends towards more personalized ideas and convictions. Once you start to give new meaning, you are responsible for that meaning, and you start to think more rather than just following the existing things or condition. So, but we don't basically go towards imagining as in without any defined imagination, but basically we work on reality. This kind of reality is, for example, we think about the worst case, like decay, like a post-apocalypse, not really those kind of matter, but what happens in recession, deep recession. You know, you've seen that things, and those are the kind of impact that you rethink again. That reality is not always what it seems. Once there's a recession, there's of course terrorism somewhere, so things get way out of control. And the third point is basically, it's all about visualization. It's about communication, how you communicate your work with drawings. This my drawing. But this is not to say that we are opposing architectural academics as what's happening now. It doesn't mean that we disregard the past or the future. It's actually we initiate things in the middle by creating something, and then we start to piece everything together. I think it's much more better. So you have a kind of like commitment to understand other things better because you are the one who's actually creating that reality. In practice, I think I've talked to David Utama yesterday. The architects will refer these kind of academic exercises as just exercise. The arguments would sometimes be about practical things. Undoubtedly, it is important, practicality. But actually, practicality basically shows about you pointing out what is obvious, because practical is basically that. It's a kind of individual habits, and it depends on culture. So it's a practical thing that, of course, as you grow older, you understand what practicality is. When I was an academician before, I talked to future architects, you guys, and you don't actually talk about something which is obvious, and everyone, layman, would know. You are talking to intellectuals, not really just somebody